In 1959, Fidel Castro became the leader of Cuba. All American companies were then nationalized. This is how Castro came into conflict with America. He then introduced communism into Cuba with the support of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union and Cuba were allies. America was strict against communism, so they did not like this. In 1962, the US also discovered Russian missile installations in Cuba.
Everyone get together!
When Kennedy received the pictures, he arranged a meeting with his executive committee. He talked about the situation with the Soviet Union and what they will have to do about it. Around the same time, the American Air Force wanted to plan an air raid on Cuba. This was also discussed.
We have to keep this a secret.
Kennedy wanted to keep this problem a secret because 1. He didn't want all the people in America to know and freak out about this, and 2. He didn't want the Soviet Union to know that they know about their missiles. The next day, Kennedy met up with Khrushchev.
Do not fire your missiles. If you do, we will have to fight back. Deal.
Khrushchev says that he will take his missiles away, but he doesn't.
Kennedy thought about the two possibilities he had. The Air Force still wanted a massive air raid on Cuba, but Kennedy himself was talking about a naval blockade because he knew that if he chose for the air raid, that would immediately cause war. He had his speechwriter write 2 speeches for him, one for the blockade and the other for the airstrike. He would read one of those on December 22nd.
So, can you write the speeches for me?
Yeah, sure.
Kennedy arranged another meeting so that he could choose between the blockade or the air raid.
So, will we go for the blockade?
Yes.
They decided to go for the blockade because this was a much safer way than the air raid.
So, if you fire missiles, there will be 20,000 victims?
Kennedy met with General Sweeney about the missiles in Cuba and whether an air raid would destroy these missiles. He found out that there would be 20,000 victims. That same day, Kennedy prepared his speech for December 22nd, but instead of using the word blockade, he used the word quarantine so that he would not exceed international laws.
Kennedy gives his speech to the people.
First, to halt this offensive build-up, a strict quarantine of all military equipment on a shipment to Cuba is being initiated.
That same day, 300 naval ships leave from Florida without any clear assignments from Kennedy.
On October 24th at 10 a.m., the quarantine officially started. Russian ships kept coming closer. The Americans had been instructed to communicate with the Russian ships first, but if they wouldn't listen, the Americans could use violence against them. Later that day, Khrushchev ordered his ships to return to the Soviet Union, but this didn't mean that it was over.
After the worst day of the crisis, day 13, Khrushchev wrote a letter which ended the crisis.
Dear Franklin Kennedy, I must say frankly that the measures indicated in your statement constitute a serious threat to peace and to the security of nations. We reaffirm that the armaments which are in Cuba, regardless of the classification to which they may belong, are intended solely for defensive purposes. I hope the United States government will display wisdom and renounce the actions pursued by you, which may lead to catastrophic consequences for world peace. Greetings, Nikita Khrushchev.
Kennedy removed his missiles in Italy and Turkey and Khrushchev his in Cuba. This brought an end to the crisis. But what could have been the consequences if this crisis did not end well? First of all, there could have been a Third World War if this did not end well. And second of all, if, for example, the Soviet Union would have fired their missiles and it failed, they could have blown up their own people, and that would cause a lot of deaths.